Hey everybody, you're on the Theophilus Games channel, and this time out we're playing Pandemic by Z-Man Games. Pandemic was designed by Matt Leacock, who also created Forbidden Island and Roll Through the Ages. This is a cooperative game for 2 to 4 players, in which you become a disease-fighting team that travels around the globe battling infections. This is one of my all-time favorite co-op games, and really it's a great gateway game to get non-gamers into the hobby. So, let's check it out. So this is the second edition of Pandemic that we're playing today. Pandemic in the second edition is exactly the same as the first edition in terms of gameplay, but there's a handful of things that are a bit different. One of those, of course, is the artwork. Pandemic got a pretty major artwork overhaul in the second edition. It went to this sort of nighttime theme, kind of dark blue, which is pretty cool for the most part. It got a lot of pluses and minuses in my view. One of the sort of minuses is the new disease cubes. These little plastic disease cubes. In the first edition they were large wood disease cubes, which I think were a little bit easier to handle and keep up with, and a little bit harder to lose. These are a little bit more troublesome to keep up with, but they do have a really interesting look. Sometimes they catch the light and glow just a little bit, which is kind of fun. The object of Pandemic is to cure 4 different diseases, represented by these 4 colors, yellow, red, blue, and black, by collecting player cards of the appropriate color. You have to collect 5 cards of the same color and be at a research station and then play those 5 cards, and once you do that, you cure a disease. So our goal is to cure all 4 diseases before they explode and take over the world and kill us all. So the first thing we want to do is get our roll cards. In Pandemic, each person is given a roll, and these rolls each have a set of special abilities that belong only to the player who has that roll. So we want to draw a roll for each player. Now in this playthrough I will be playing solo, but I'm going to be playing 3 players, so I'll have 3 rolls that we'll work through, and hopefully we'll get a good mix of rolls. So let's see what we get. Our first roll looks like it's going to be the Dispatcher. Okay, so the Dispatcher is able to move other pawns around the board really easily. Can move pawns from a location to any other location that has a pawn. This is actually a good one for helping to get around the world in a quick way. So glad to have the Dispatcher on board. We also will be playing with the Medic. The Medic is actually my favorite role. I'm really glad to have this one in the mix. The Medic is able to remove all disease cubes from a location with a single action. This is really, really awesome for keeping your outbreaks in check. And our third role will be the Researcher. The Researcher is also a great one because she can share knowledge with anybody in any city. She's much better at passing cards from one player to another player, which is important for getting diseases cured. So this is actually a really nice mix of roles. I'm very happy with our draw. So as you can see, I've put our 3 pawns on the board. We've got the purple pawn that's going to represent the Dispatcher. We've got this reddish colored pawn that's going to represent the Medic. This is kind of one of the quirks of Pandemic. At least so far, within these 2 editions, they've not been able to come up with an orange colored pawn that would match what's on the card. Strangely, it's been a red pawn in both editions, so you just kind of have to know that the red really means orange. So the red pawn, who is going to be our Medic, and then the brown pawn that represents our Researcher. So this is a 3-player game, and so each of the players is dealt 3 player cards to begin the game. As you can see here, our Dispatcher has been dealt 2 black cards and 1 blue card. Our Researcher has been dealt 1 black card, 1 red card, and 1 event card called Airlift. The Airlift is pretty cool because it allows you to move 1 pawn to any city without having to take an action to do it. So this can save you an action and actually get you to where you need to be in the world quicker and easier, which we like. And our Medic has been dealt 1 blue, 1 red, and 1 event card. In this case, it's the Government Grant. Government Grant allows us to build 1 research station anywhere in the world without having to discard a card to do it. So we like that one a lot as well. And now we'll determine where our initial infections are going to be. Now to start the game, we infect 9 cities. We do that by drawing cards from this infection deck here. The first 3 cards we draw, each of those cities will get 3 cubes of disease. The next 3 will each get 2 cubes of disease, and finally the last 3 get 1 cube of disease each. So let's see where our initial infections are going to be. First city with 3 cubes is going to be Cairo. 3 cubes for Cairo. And our next 3 cube city is going to be Lima. And 3 for Lima. Notice we always put the cubes of the color of the city on that city. So in Lima's case, Lima is a yellow city, it's yellow cubes. And our last 3 cube city is Taipei. And now for 2 cube cities. Our first 2 cube city will be Sydney. And another 2 cube city will be Delhi. Delhi always seems to come up in my games. I don't know why, but seemingly I draw it every game. And our last 2 cube city is Jakarta. Now Jakarta and Sydney are connected with 2 cubes each, so this is going to be a corner of the world where we really can't forget about. And now for our 1 cube cities. Our first one will be New York. Our first blue cube of the game. Right there in New York City. And after that, Tehran. And Tehran, right next to Delhi, is another one we're going to have to watch out for. And lastly, we have Los Angeles. The West Coast and the East Coast both dealing with some disease. Now there's only one way to win Pandemic, and that is to find cures for each of the 4 diseases, but there's lots of ways to lose. One of the ways to lose is this outbreak meter here. Anytime that a cluster of 3, like this one here in Lima, anytime you're required to put another cube on that, it outbreaks, which means that it infects each of the attached cities. And whenever you have an outbreak, you move the outbreak meter down to the next level, like that. And as you can see, the outbreak meter goes all the way down to a skull at 8. So if you have 8 outbreaks, you lose the game. Another way to lose is to have to put a cube of a particular color on the board and to be out of that particular color cube. So if I run out of yellow and I have to put a yellow on the board, I will lose. This is another reason why it's incredibly important not to lose your cubes, because there's a fixed number of them that determines when you lose the game. So make sure you keep your pieces. And then the final way to lose is if we run out of player cards. This is our player deck. If we have to draw a card from this player deck and we're out of cards, that means we've run out of time, and so has the world. We lose. So that's our initial setup. Really not too bad. Usually a game of Pandemic is all about controlling where the clusters of 3 are, because anytime one of these clusters of 3, anytime the game requires us to put another cube on those, they'll outbreak, which means that they infect all of the connected cities. And right now, our 3s are pretty spread out. We've got 1 here in Taipei, 1 in Cairo in the middle of the board, and then 1 over here in Lima. That's nice. You want those to be separated from one another so that they don't trigger each other when they go off. So I actually really like this initial setup. I think we have a really good chance of winning this one, but we'll see what happens. So now we're ready for our first turn. Now, the rules specify that the person who was most recently sick is the first player to take a turn. Now, obviously here, all these players are me. So therefore, we're going to pretend that our dispatcher here has recently had a case of the sniffles, and he's going to go first. Now, the first thing a player does on their turn is to take 4 actions. One of the actions that you can take is to share information. Now, the way a share information action usually works is 2 players have to be in a city that is named on a card, and if they're in that city, then they can pass the card from one player to the other player. However, the researcher has as one of her special abilities the ability to share information in whatever city she's in, regardless of what it says on the card. And this can happen either on her turn or on another player's turn. They can take a card from her. So that's what we're going to do. So our dispatcher, first thing that our dispatcher will do is take this Baghdad card, this black card, as a share information action. So that's 1. And then our dispatcher is going to use one of his special abilities, which is he has the ability to move any other player's pawn as though it was his own. In this case, we're going to move the researcher down to Lima so she can deal with that infection on her turn, which is going to be the next turn up. So he is going to, with his other 3 actions, take this brown pawn and move it 2, 3, 4 down here to Lima so that the researcher can deal with the problems going on in South America. After taking 4 actions, a player on their turn will draw 2 cards from the player deck. So let's see what 2 cards our dispatcher gets. First, oh, outstanding. This is the Resilient Population card. It's an event card, and it allows us to remove 1 card from the infection discard pile from the game. We get to take a card completely out of the game. This is awesome because we can actually make a city completely resistant to infections for the rest of the game. So we'll be playing this one at a critical time, I'm sure. And our next card is another red, in this case Bangkok. So our dispatcher now has 3 black, a blue, a red, and the Resilient Population card. And after a player has taken their 4 actions and drawn their 2 cards, the next thing to do is to infect cities. So based on the infection rate, which is what you see here, which goes up during the game, we draw this number of city cards and put 1 cube on each of those cities. So let's see where the new infections are. Khartoum will get 1 yellow cube. And Essen will get 1 blue cube. Even Europe is not safe. Okay, so now it's the researcher's turn. So we moved her down to Lima so she could deal with the 3Z there. This game is all about controlling your 3s. If you can do that, you usually win. And so she's going to deal with the infection there in Lima. She is going to remove these 3 cubes from the board. 1, 2, 3 actions. She's treated this disease and these cubes go away. And then we're going to play her airlift card. Now, the airlift card does not count as an action and can be played at any time, which is pretty cool. See, play any time, not an action. So in the middle of her turn, we can make her leave Lima and she travels across the world all the way over here to Taipei. And she arrives in Taipei with 1 action left, which means she can remove 1 of these cubes for her 4th action, and thereby she keeps 2 different cities from outbreaking. And now our globe-trotting researcher will draw herself a couple of player cards. First we have One Quiet Night, another event card. We're getting a lot of event cards early on here, but that's okay. These are actually pretty good weapons for us. So again, it can be played anytime. It's not an action. One Quiet Night allows us to skip the infect cities step. So this is pretty cool, especially if you know that bad things are coming. This lets you slow the bad things down just a little bit. And we'll flip 1 more card, and we get another black. So if she can pass this to the dispatcher at some point, that'd be pretty alright. And so our researcher now has 1 red, 1 black, and the One Quiet Night card. Okay, and now we get some more bad stuff. So, we have to infect 2 more cities. Istanbul. Istanbul is right in the middle of everything. As you can see, it's connected to so many cities. So this is actually one that's really important to control. If it blows up on you, it's bad times. And our last city for this turn is Hong Kong. Hong Kong is just about the same as Istanbul. It's connected to everything. And so when it blows up, again, that's some pretty bad times. Okay, and so now it's our medic's turn. Now our medic, before he begins with his actions, is going to play his government grant card. This allows us to build a research station anywhere we want in the world. Now we're doing this before we take our actions because it allows us to build a research station, and as one of your actions you can move between research stations for just one action. So it makes it a little bit easier to get around. We're going to build a research station here in Cairo. Just like that. And then, having built a research station in Cairo, our medic is going to move from Atlanta to Cairo, 1, and then he's going to use his special ability, which is he can clear an entire city of infection cubes in one action. So he's going to do that here in Cairo, 2. And then we'll have him move north to Istanbul, 3, and clear this cube, 4. And now our medic's 2 cards. First, another black card, in this case Tehran. And Chicago, a blue card. And so our medic ends up with 2 blue, 1 black, and 1 red. And now more bad stuff. We're going to infect 2 more cities. First we've got St. Petersburg. Apparently the Essen infection is spreading. And we also infect Tokyo. Good thing our researcher is in the neighborhood. So after the first turn, we're in pretty good shape. We're really not close to curing anything, but we're at least controlling infection, and that's always a good start. So now we're back to our dispatcher's turn. Now, our dispatcher is going to use another one of the dispatcher's special abilities, which is that the dispatcher can move any pawn to a city that has another pawn in it. In this case, the dispatcher is going to move himself over to where the researcher is, because we're going to build a research station over there in Asia this turn. So, with action 1, the dispatcher is going to leave Atlanta here and travel over to Taipei, where our researcher is. That's 1. And then from there, we're going to move 2, 3 down to Bangkok. And then our dispatcher is going to use his Bangkok card, which he had in his hand, and discard it in order to build a research station here in Bangkok. Now this is going to help us move around the board a little bit quicker, and also gives us more options as to where we can cure diseases once we draw the appropriate cards. Hopefully that happens pretty soon. 2 more cards for our dispatcher. First we have a yellow card, Khartoum. And second, a blue card, Montreal. Now there is a hand limit in Pandemic. Each player can only have 7 cards. So after they draw their cards and resolve any epidemics that may occur, they have to discard down to 7. And as you can see here, our dispatcher now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards. So hopefully we can either play some in the near future or get some things to discard that we don't mind losing. And now we infect 2 more cities. Kolkata. This part of the board is getting pretty busy. And San Francisco. So apparently there's some disease on the west coast, but it's just a little bit. So now it's our researcher's turn, and she's going to spend this turn just treating some disease, knocking off some cubes. So we're going to take these 2 cubes off of Taipei, 1, 2, and then we're going to move over to Hong Kong 3 and take this Hong Kong cube off 4. And 2 more cards for our researcher. First we have Ho Chi Minh City, another red card. And bum bum bum, our first epidemic card. Yeah, I was thinking it was kind of going a long time before we got an epidemic card, so here is our first one. Now, whenever you draw an epidemic card, you have to do the 3 things that are on here. First, you're going to increase the infection rate by moving up the infection rate marker. Then, we're going to infect a new city by drawing the bottom card from the infection deck and putting 3 cubes on that city. So that's going to put a whole new 3Z into the game. And then finally, we intensify. Now this is where Pandemic gets kind of tense. You take all the cards that are in the discard pile and you shuffle them, and then you put them on top of your draw pile. So that means that the cities that have been getting infected are going to get more infected. And this is where the problems usually start in this game. So, as we saw on our epidemic card, the first thing we do is increase the infection rate. Now in this case it just goes from 2 to 2, but as you can see later on in the game we're going to infect 3 cities and later on 4 cities, so it gets pretty intense. After we increase the infection rate, next thing we're going to do is infect a new city. So we're going to pick up this deck here and we're going to draw the bottom card from this deck, and it is London. Sorry, London. London gets 3 blue cubes. And then after doing that, we're going to intensify by taking this discard pile, shuffling it up and putting it back on top of our draw deck. Now, here we have a choice to make. We actually do have the Resilient Population card. Usually the right time to play a Resilient Population card is at this step. You can actually do it in the middle of this epidemic phase and choose a card out of this discard pile to get rid of. Now in our case, London, the card that we just drew, is the only city that we have that has 3 disease cubes on it right now. So it's the only thing that could, in fact, outbreak if we were to draw it. Now, there's a pretty thick stack of cards here. This isn't like, just a couple of cards. This is actually a pretty good pile. And we're only going to draw 2 cities out of this pile. So really, by not playing the card, we're taking a gamble that we don't draw London as one of those 2 cards. And the next turn, the medic is going to have his turn, and he's going to make it to London before it outbreaks, if we don't draw it in these next 2. So, I think we're going to roll the dice. We're going to just shuffle these infection cards that we have here, and not play our Resilient Population card, and hope against hope that it's not one of the 2 cards we draw. I have a feeling we're going to need Resilient Population in a worse way later on. So we're going to put these on top of this draw pile, and then we're going to draw 2 and hope we don't hit London. Here we go. Khartoum. And Essen. Oh, I saw a blue card. I got a little worried there. But lucky for us, it's just Essen. Now, putting another cube on Essen is all the more reason for our medic here to deal with London on his next turn. But he should be able to do that pretty easily, and we'll still be in pretty good shape. So in this series, the way I've decided to break up the videos is I'm going to end each video whenever I draw an epidemic card. So that way we lead up to a cliffhanger, and then we resolve the epidemic, we see what happens, and then we'll see if our heroes can deal with the problems that they're facing in the next video. So in this case, we just had our epidemic, so this will be the end of this video. I'll upload this and edit it and put it up online. But at least for now, not a lot of cliffhanger-iness here. The only really spot of danger we have is London, and our medic is going to deal with that on his next turn pretty simply So right now we're in really good shape, but Pandemic is a game that can turn on a dime. You think you're doing great, and then you are in the toilet. So, we'll see what happens with these next couple of turns. Until then, you've been watching the Theophilus Games channel, and game on!